Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the 1000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People initiative. This is an introduction to the practical guide for integrated landscape management, which we're very excited to be presenting today to you in full. Just before we get too much into the webinar, I'm going to take care of a few housekeeping items. My name is Tom Durr. I'm the program coordinator for the 1000 Landscapes initiative with Eco Agriculture Partners. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all participants after the completion of the webinar. We have a fantastic group of speakers joining us today who I will introduce throughout this webinar. Please do introduce yourself in the chat and or the Q&A. Great if you can provide your name, where you're from, and the organization you're affiliated with. And before we get too much into it, I want to hand it over to Sarah Shear, my colleague, the president and CEO of Eco Agriculture Partners and the chair of the 1000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People initiative. So Sarah, thanks for giving us some welcoming remarks, and over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone here. We're really delighted to have you with us today. This practical guide, although we've been working for a couple of years really hard now across the whole network of 1000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People, this is the first major collaborative product that we're making public. So we're really excited about it, really proud of it, and delighted that several hundred of you are logging on today and reaching out to participate in this. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the founding partners of 1000 Landscapes, which include not only ourselves, EcoAg is the convener of the initiative, but Rainforest Alliance, our co-organizer, Conservation International, Common Land, Tech Matters, the UN Development Program, the Landscape Finance Lab as well. We started this together, but we did not do this alone. As all of you know, all around the world, local farmer organizations, environmental organizations, local governments, local businesses, and many others have begun to mobilize together to work in different ways than the ones that they did in silos in the past, to address the overlapping crises of food system dysfunction, climate change, land and watershed degradation, rural poverty, and biodiversity decline. This is really challenging work technically and organizationally, and we really do need radical collaboration across the globe to learn from one another in order to move much more quickly. This practical guide lays out a comprehensive yet concise process for what we've been calling integrated landscape management, which goes by many different names. That's the umbrella term that we use. And I'm really proud of the fact that this guide drew not only from the best practice among our own organizations, but that we reached out to bring in insights and tools and methods from many other landscape allies, and particularly from Landscape Partnership's own innovations in the field, which we have been looking at over the last couple of years. We're hoping that this guide will be very useful and very adaptable for both existing partnerships that have done some good work together for the last decade or 2 decades and are trying to scale up their impact and their reach, and also for groups that are just newly forming to create partnerships for landscape regeneration. We hope that you'll all find something of value in the practical guide for your own work, and we look forward very much to your feedback on the guide as it continues to develop over the next few years. But with a brief introduction and welcome, I'll pass it back to Tom, who'll moderate the event, the rest of the event. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah. So give me a moment here to share my screen. All right, so welcome again, and thanks again, Sarah, for that warm welcome. Just to give you a quick overview of our agenda for today, I'm going to briefly take us through the 1000 Landscapes initiative for those who might not be familiar with it, and give you a quick explanation of what we're all about and what we're trying to do to frame this webinar. And I'm also going to give you a quick recap of an overview of the practical guide before handing it over to my colleague, Louise Buck, who will give a much more in-depth overview of the guide, and then we're going to hear from some fantastic speakers who are both members of the 1000 Landscapes Landscape Leaders Advisory Group, who are going to give us case studies about their own experiences implementing integrated landscape management, both from the Sierra Gorda landscape in Mexico. Pati Ruiz Corzo, we're very pleased to have you with us today, and also from the Alberta Seascape in Brazil, Guilherme Dutra from Conservation International Brazil, who will be presenting on that landscape. And throughout this webinar, I do encourage you to ask questions in the chat. We'll answer them, some of them in real time, but we will certainly save some time at the end of this webinar for discussion before closing the webinar. So in total, this should be about a 90-minute webinar. And to get us started here more formally, I'm going to give a quick overcap of the 1000 Landscapes Initiative. So the 1000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People initiative was formally incepted in 2019. And we came together as a group of partners that was really focused on empowering and enabling local landscape partnerships to implement as effectively and efficiently as possible landscape management. And so one of the primary things that we do as an initiative is develop tools and services for capacity strengthening, finance solutions, software and technology tools through our platform called Terrasso, and developing communities and supporting communities through our team called the Community Catalyst. All of this is supported by a hub that coordinates and convenes the initiatives, hosts our governance system, does our communications outreach and advocacy. And we're really structured around what we call design teams. And these design teams develop these tools and services and are right now actively prototyping, co-designing, developing, and demonstrating their effectiveness in the field with local landscape partnerships. Tools and services, though, really aren't the only thing that landscape partnerships need to be successful. So 1000 Landscapes is also doing the best we can to create an enabling environment by creating and jumpstarting policies and advocating for policies that will really support landscape partnerships to do whatever it is they need to do based on their own best decisions that they come together to agreement on as a partnership. Overall, we're ultimately trying to catalyze strong systems change to create transformation in this space and allow landscape partnerships to make their own best decisions according to them. So recognizing how big and ambitious these goals are, in the very early days of the initiative, we recognized that this wasn't the job for just one or even several organizations, but really many organizations. So as Sarah previously mentioned in her opening remarks, the 1000 Landscapes Initiative is stewarded and championed by a group of 7 core partners whose logos you can see below. But we really leverage and collaborate strongly with a much larger group of partners than just the 7 organizations listed here. We work with over 30 technical partners who come from all over the world and focus on different issues, both at the local, the regional, the national, and the international level, who are all very passionate about landscape management and want to join us on this mission and this journey to scale up ILM. Most importantly, above and beyond these organizations that we work with a collection of landscape partnerships all over the world who we are currently working with in what we call the co-design, testing, and demonstration phase of the initiative. During this phase, which we entered in 2020 and we will be in it until at least the end of next year, we're developing different tools and services that landscape partnerships can use to really effectively and efficiently implement ILM. And these are tools and services around capacity strengthening. So we're working on a whole series of landscape learning modules, which Louise will actually touch on in a little bit. We're developing different finance tools for integrated landscape finance and mechanisms that will actually shift the way funding flows into landscape partnerships. We're developing a digital landscape action platform called Terrasso, which is open source and user-friendly and is being rolled out later this year, which will allow landscape partnerships to share, collect, map, and do all sorts of different things with data that they previously have had difficulty doing. And we're also working with these landscapes to catalyze communities, both at the local and the national level, to create the enabling environment that they need to implement integrated landscape management. So we really thank these initial set of landscapes for working with us. Of course, this is just the beginning. As our name suggests, we really want to be scaling up post 2023 to reach as many landscape partnerships and support as many landscape partnerships as possible. And with the current body of partners we have now, we can really get far, but we can't get as far as we would like. So if you're interested in collaborating with us, whether you're an organization or a landscape leader, or whatever your role might be, feel free to reach out to me for more information about how you can collaborate with 1000L. So I want to give a quick overview of the process that it took to create this practical guide. So as Sarah mentioned, we recognize that there are all sorts of different information, different terms used to describe integrated landscape management, whether you call it holistic landscape management, territorial development, watershed management, seascape management. We recognize all those terms and processes as valid. But we did also recognize that there was difficulty that landscape partnerships were having on the ground in navigating this quite complex system of terminologies and processes when it comes to actually doing ILM. So when the partners of 1000 Landscapes first came together, we all had our own sorts of tools, our resources. We were aware of other really powerful resources. And we recognized early on that we really needed to develop a concise, coherent, but yet comprehensive set of processes that local landscape leaders could follow to actually do ILM. So this guide is our first attempt at doing that. It presents 5 elements of integrated landscape management that many of you are probably already familiar with, and then further breaks down those elements, as Louise will describe briefly, into outputs that can take you on the journey of integrated landscape management as a process and a pathway. Accompanying the guide is a tool guide that leverages and documents existing resources based around the structure that is presented in the guide. So these resources are the existing tools out there, given that 1000 Landscapes very much has a mandate not to recreate the wheel. We want to give credit and leverage everything that is already out there and build upon that. So this guide is really meant to be not only a structure for us to develop future 1000 Landscapes tools and resources around, but also we hope a guide and a structure and an infrastructure for others to also build their tools, services, and resources around as we move forward. The guide, the practical guide and the tool guide currently exists for download in PDF form, and we can share those in the chat if you haven't seen them already. But we're also developing a more interactive digital version of this tool as well. So in the near future, our team at Tech Matters, which supports our platform for 1000 Landscapes called Terrasso, is developing a digital version of the practical guide and the tool guide that you'll be able to access to actually find this as a centralized one-stop shop for everything that you need within the guide. It'll provide links to other resources within 1000L and links to other external resources. So we're very excited about this. And I want to emphasize that both the guide, the practical guide, the tool guide, and this version on Terrasso are just the first version of this. We expect to be updating these resources on an annual basis to reflect our learnings and the development of the things that come forward within the field of integrated landscape management. So thanks for bearing with me on just that quick introduction. We'll get to the real exciting part right now. And it's my pleasure to hand it over to Louise Buck, who is the lead for collaborative management at Eco Agriculture Partners. She's also a senior extension associate with the Department of Natural Resources at Cornell University and the lead of the capacity strengthening and design team at 1000 Landscapes. So Louise, over to you. I'm going to ask you to mute yourself, Louise.
Many thanks, Tom, and thank you and welcome to everyone who's participating in this webinar. It's my pleasure to talk about the integrated landscape management process to begin with, and then we'll go and carry on to discuss how this process leads our work, the conceptual aspect of our work to develop the guide. So 1000L views integrated landscape management as an adaptive, collaborative, iterative process to help stakeholders transform change in their landscapes. The process involves continuous learning and doing by the landscape partners who drive it. So you'll notice at the center of our wheel, we have the landscape partnership. And this collaboration looks at collaborative learning that is an underlying phenomena to ILM, sometimes called social learning. And it mobilizes the power of learning in groups to stimulate innovative solutions to the complex problems that many integrated landscape initiatives are formed to help address. And social learning connects different perspectives, ways of knowing, and knowledge about particular places and situations through the landscape partnership. Next, please. So we label each stage of the integrated landscape management process as an element. The 5 elements involve forming the partnership, developing a shared understanding about needs and opportunities in the landscape. Based on that understanding, conducting a visioning and planning process to decide what to do and where, then undertaking the actions needed, and finally monitoring and learning how the effort is working. So the outputs that are connected with each element of this process provide direction and focus for working together as productively as possible. And the practical guide is organized around this structure to offer a roadmap to ILM. This is the structure that 1000L is using to co-design and develop the tools and services that Tom mentioned earlier. So next, please. To make sure that this process happens well, we find that landscape partners also need certain foundational competencies that cut across all of the elements and outputs to improve the quality of the integrated landscape management process. So first among these foundational competencies is shared leadership. Sharing leadership roles and responsibilities in a landscape partnership is needed to support the collaborative learning and action. And this effective practice requires complementary leadership styles and strengths that different people bring to the leadership of the initiative. And this depiction of important attributes of shared leadership as applied in ILM was sketched by a graphic artist during a 1.5-hour virtual dialogue with some 15 of our technical partners to discover what the practice means and what capacities and conditions are needed for sharing leadership effectively in integrated landscape initiatives. So we're using this graphic in designing a learning module on shared leadership, as well as the one that follows on facilitation. Next, please. So we look at facilitation as a leadership style that goes along with shared leadership. And facilitated leadership we distinguish from more directive leadership that we anticipate will foster trust and bring out the best performance in others. And again, this graphic highlights what the technical partners who we brought together to define facilitation in the context of ILM is the characteristics and conditions needed to gain this competency and practicing integrated landscape management across the different elements. Next, please. Knowing how to facilitate diversity, inclusion in landscape partnerships is another key foundational competency in integrated landscape management. And presently, one of 1000L's technical partners who is especially experienced in facilitating and teaching how to create diverse and inclusive relationships in the context of ILM is depicted here, is leading the development of a learning module that's designed to promote trust, foster creative solutions, and generate buy-in for the plans that the landscape partnerships develop together. Next, please. Another sort of what we refer to as foundational competency that we feel is needed in order to implement integrated landscape management in a very high quality way is what we refer to as landscape literacy. And this is primarily about understanding ecological flows in the landscape. For example, flows of water, nutrients, wildlife, and so on, and how we can use this understanding to design what we refer to as the win-win solutions across different parts of the land, and of course across different sectors and disciplines who are designing these solutions. Next, please. Another foundational competency that we feel is needed to practice integrated landscape management well is what we refer to as integrated landscape finance. So a common problem in landscape partnerships is, finding the funding that can support the priority activities of the landscape. And so the integrated landscape finance is a proposed set of solutions to this ubiquitous problem. And we've identified a set of activities moving from our landscape strategy through the process of finding funding from a variety of different sources, public, private, civic sector sources, that encourages synergies between investments and ideally generates impact at scale. Next, please. So then we get to what we refer to as our core ILM learning modules. So in the last few slides, I talked about foundational competencies that are needed to ensure the quality of integrated landscape management practice. The core learning modules correspond with the 5 elements and with their various outputs. And a key characteristic of the modules that we're developing is they're all spatially oriented. In other words, we're trying to help landscape partnerships become familiar with the use of maps and other spatial planning and management tools, recognizing the importance of location in doing integrated landscape management well. Next, please. So presently, our capacities development or capacity strengthening design team is working on a suite of pilot learning modules that correspond with these 3, or actually the first 3 of these 4 outputs for element 3. And what we're planning to do, we're working in a co-design space. We're working with a suite of core partners and technical partners and landscape partners to get their input and ideas about what would constitute a useful learning module. Each of these modules will be organized around at least one and maybe more of the tools that are outlined in the document that complements and is a sort of a companion document with the practical guide. And in this process, we envision what we have is as we test these 3 modules in the near future we're going to test both an online version and an in-person version. And once that testing of these pilot modules is complete, or is at least underway, we will move to develop modules for the rest of the outputs. And we anticipate that lots of need for help with this. And so I echo Tom's request and expression of interest. If people would like to be involved in helping us develop these modules, which will deepen the information that's in the practical guide, we invite you to consider doing that. So thank you, Tom, and back over to you.
Thank you, Louise. Excuse me. So I'm going to pass it over now to Pati Ruiz Corzo, who is the director of the Sierra Gorda Ecological Group in Mexico. Pati is also a member of the 1000 Landscapes Leader Advisory Group with a wealth of experience in integrated landscape management. And we're very lucky to have you with us here today, Pati. So do you need a moment to, oh, there it is. You're already sharing the screen. So over to you, Pati, and thanks again. You'll need to unmute yourself, Pati.
Morning to everybody. Pleasure for me to be here with you and to have the opportunity to share this experience that we have developed in Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve in central Mexico. I was a foreigner once in my life. I came from a very urban life, and with my husband and my kids got to the Sierra Gorda looking for a different way of life and to reconnect with nature. So Sierra Gorda gave us answers, and we integrated the ecological group 35 years ago. And as a practitioner, in advance practitioner of the guide that you are launching today, I have lived it myself step by step, and I may tell that it's full of common sense and it's grounded and well said. So having said that, I was surprised when we reviewed this guide, and I found social understanding in the way things have to be done in this very holistic vision of the land and the communities that live within the reserve. So we began as a Grupo Ecológico 35 years ago, and we have 4 more sister organizations working in different projects. Sierra Gorda, supports every micro tourism entrepreneur we may strengthen. Yeah, so we have 60 small enterprises that I will tell you later. Joya del Hielo, that purchased land for conservation. We have 10,000 hectares as a private reserves. Viva Sierra Gorda, based in San Francisco, California, that does promotion and it's our fiscal sponsor. And Bosque Sustentable, who does soils, food, and forest. And there we are. Laura, no me deja pasar a la siguiente. Ya. Oh, this goes. Okay, we have developed through all these years this grounding bottom up by getting that common point of view with the local communities. Yeah, there we are. Grupo Ecológico, the sister organizations, and many alliances and work groups that we belong to. We have more than 42 international awards where every line of action has been rewarded and recognized, and it is part of the capital of this local NGO. Yeah, thanks to those alliances, nowadays we can work and operate as a living experience of sustainability and climate action in the 33% of Querétaro state. We deal with every stakeholder, from the landowners to the governor of the state. Yeah, with every different ministry and local governments. And we are, as our main project always has been environmental education. Yeah, where we after COVID had to change our way of dealing with the communities, but we have with thousands of local owners, teachers, students, forest people, agriculture, and beekeepers, and all the different segments that we deal with, this shared vision of that we have the pleasure to live in a biosphere reserve, a protected territory that we chose as a society to pursue. And we got it in the 97, and we are the only biosphere reserve in Mexico that has grown bottom up. And it has given us the legal framework to defend the territory. Yeah, we have kept the integrity of the ecosystems that we take care in Sierra Gorda. And there we are doing nowadays virtual education for every stakeholder. Yeah, and we do environmental education with the municipalities, with all the functionaries on tourism and solid waste and water and forest, and all the time those are our school parents committees who are committed to develop the green protocol, that are a series of actions that we as a community may develop and move as an answer for climate change. So linking the schools with the parents, with young groups, young people groups, as ecoclubes, developing recycling, reforestation, cleaning campaigns, water harvesting, participating in all these activities, the parents and the municipalities, big tanks in the big roofs we have in Sierra Gorda, and they are part of this green protocol. And giving value to nature, we have developed a carbon footprint mechanism for Querétaro State. We began grounding Kyoto Protocol 10 years ago. And we have gone through the labyrinth of the payment for ecosystem services, carbon credits, and we have learned a lot. And now we have a friendly protocol operating for 6 years already to pay the landowners to exclude the cattle of grazing under the forest. And you may see what's the miracle that happened. And people who owns the forest is finally receiving payments for the services they provide, water and carbon. We have developed a mechanism that will provide the private enterprises of Querétaro, the corporates, the opportunity to reduce the carbon footprint, regenerating the state forest, or they may pay taxes. But we are part of the solution as a climate change public policy at subnational level. Querétaro, our state, is a champion in the national scenery, pushing these payments with a friendly protocol and developing financing mechanism to give economic value to the natural capital. So we have like 10,000 hectares that are already receiving these payments. And when this tax from the government of Querétaro will begin at middle of next year, we will need more and more forests to supply the demand that we are going to have. So what we are planning is to pay better and better, for water, for carbon, for biodiversity. You can see the miracle. You can see the miracle of those forests where the cattle has been excluded. We are not planting trees in big scale as we used to do. We are just excluding the cattle, and maybe we have 20% more of the forest of what we used to have 20 years ago. Yeah. Soon we will receive the final results of a monitoring analysis that the researchers are doing, and we know that we have more forest now than what we used to have 20 years ago. And there are all the different regimes for conservation that we have developed in this corridor, and it operates very well. And the money doesn't stop in consultants, it goes directly to the communities. Yeah, they are our partners. They own the forest, precious cloud forests in central Mexico. Do you think they are able to deal with the stock exchange, with carbon credits? That's why we develop a friendly protocol. Yeah, many of them are illiterate. How do we commit themselves to such a demanding requirement? So with this point of view, we have very happy communities protecting their forest. And we are up to here with no timber products, yeah, where we are strengthening capacities, getting the equipment, the training, the legal framework. And there we are fighting fires, our most, the biggest threat for our forest. Yeah. From among all the threats we have around, fires, it's the worst. So we deal with all the different brigades and we strengthen them and we try to communicate, to be linked. And we are very aware during drought seasons, and we have our own brigade that is in the front. And do our daily duty is to do environmental education and growing that pride, because we are serranos and we love the planet and we are recycling and we are taking care and we recognize our land as motherland. So we work with every segment of primary productivity in Sierra Gorda. Yeah, supporting them in every possible way, rehabilitating their services. And now we have this very proudly group of women working tourism services, yeah, looking for certification, regional and international certification. So in Sierra Gorda, we have lived step by step the guide. And the learnings are that it needs all the love you can give, all the faith you may raise, how to get the financing for so many projects. I have hundreds of projects, yeah, and we support them in long-term basis until they may walk by themselves. So it requires a lot of public relations, faith, waves. You just know that you have to do it and the providence will give you the house. And we have worked in that point of view since 35 years ago. It works. And persistent, to be persistent, no? If you think that it has to be done, if you think it's a good, you have really go and look for it to make it ground and happen. And maybe 20 years later, people says, hey, you were right. Yeah, as the friendly protocol. Well, so more than ever, Mother Earth needs our hearts, and it is just our time to raise entrepreneurship, to strengthen our leadership, because we know that we have the big responsibility in this crucial moment of global warming, and it's up to us, the oldies, and the middles and the little ones, to everyone, but we, the grandmas, grandmamas, are part of this game. We know we have the experience, we have the relations. Then my invitation, is to every stakeholder, just put your hearts, your minds to love the planet, regenerating the natural resources. It's our opportunity to reconnect with Mother Earth and to be proud to be one of them that is on the trenches, loving on the ground the planet. Thank you and congratulations for this well done guide. All the success, it must be included in so many levels of learning. Let's do it, Sarah Shear. Thank you. ¿Quién dijo que todo está perdido? Yo vengo a entregar mi corazón. A wave of love for Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty, for the fantastic presentation and the inspirational message in the performance just now. For those of you that don't know, Patty is a fantastic singer as well. So Patty, if you don't mind, please stop sharing your screen and I will start sharing mine again. In a moment, I'll hand it over to our next presenter. But as we're transitioning here, thanks, Laura, thanks, Patty. I'm going to ask everyone to please use the Q&A to share or ask any questions, and we'll moderate them in a moment after our final presenter. So it's my pleasure now to welcome Guilherme Dutra, the Director of the Marine Program at Conservation International in Brazil, who is also a member of the Landscape Leaders Advisory Group. So Guilherme, if you give me a moment here, I will share my screen again. And the floor is yours, Guilherme, please.
Hello all, good morning, afternoon, night. I know there are people from different parts of the world and it's very good to be in this kind of group sharing experiences. Thank you very much, Pati, for your very inspirational speech. And I would like to start saying that as you, I'm not originally from Abrolhos, from this region I'm going to talk about, but my parents decided to move to there something like 30 years ago, looking for a better place to live in the world. And it was a fantastic choice. And my heart is also very linked to this place too. And I had the opportunity of working basically all my professional life in this land and seascape. So thank you very much to the agriculture for organizing this and for leading this 1,000 landscapes initiative that I think is a fantastic initiative for the world. Next, please. And we are going. We are working in this region, as I said, for 25, 26 years now. And I will start explaining a little bit about how is this area has evolved to a land and seascape. We are talking about an area that starts on the land, and we have this coastal ecosystems mainly formed by Atlantic forests in the past, and now we have the remnants that are these areas in green. Then we have the banks, the marine banks of Abrolhos and Royal Charlotte. We have this long seamount chain that goes from the banks to the oceanic islands, and we have two big oceanic islands that are the outer part of this seascape. So the area is about 89 million hectares with a population of 1.7 million people in the coastline. The climate is humid tropical, and the main economies in the region are planted forests, agriculture, tourism, and fisheries. There are many traditional communities in the region, And the biodiversity is also huge. We have the largest coral reefs in the Southern Atlantic, the largest calcareous algae bank known in the world, and the largest remnants of Atlantic forest from our northeast region in Brazil. And many things have changed along this year, this time in this land and seascape, and I will try to summarize some of them. And I structured the presentation here, linked to the 5 elements of the guide to make it more comprehensible. The next, please. So we have started making partnerships from the beginning in this trajectory. And now the partnerships are divided in these 3 main groups. We have governance schemes for the financial ecosystem. So we are trying to identify the main opportunities and the main funds being invested, both from governmental, non-governmental, and company perspectives in the region. And we are trying to guide them for common results. And we have coastal and marine groups, technical groups working, also including NGOs, including government representatives, and including other smaller networks like Futuri that I will talk more in some slides. But this is a changing ecosystem for sure. This is the picture of the present partners in this scheme. In the past, we had many others, and I'm sure we'll have many others in the future. The next, please. And of course, we had to identify the borders of these areas a long time, and this understanding has changed a long time. So in 2000, when we started the initial projects in the region, we have a focus on the protected areas. You can see in the sea, the Abrolhos National Park in red, and in the coastline, the terrestrial Atlantic Forest Parks. And all the conservation work was focused on those areas, and we have learned a lot from these. And one of the first learnings was that this network of protected areas was not enough to maintain the biodiversity in the region. So the next, please. We have then considered the need of working in another scale. So near 10 years later, in 2009, we were working in another scale that we call it the Abrolhos region. You can see that a number of protected areas were added to the system, especially extractive reserves that are multiple use reserves that were requests from the local communities that the NGOs and the government have supported technically for them to be created. And this line in red surrounding the entire region in the sea was our first regional limit, and it was basically created to protect the region against big threats like oil and gas or mining or shrimp farms that were expanding in the region in the past. The next, please. And then we have the present design of this land and seascape. You can see that we basically extended this a lot to both to cover the marine areas and the oceanic islands and these big, large-scale marine protected areas that were created in this area of our economic exclusive zone, as well as on land. And we have considered to include all the watersheds, the micro watersheds we had in the region to define the limits on land. So we are really trying to look at the linkages on these ecosystems, and the water is the main driver of those linkages. The next, please. And for advancing on that, we have identified for this third element of vision and planning, these main priorities of action in the region. So the first one is strengthening the protected areas network and expanding this when possible. Work directly with the forest conservation and restoration, and the Atlantic forest in the region was really destroyed in the past. More than 80% of the areas were deforested, and we have a big challenge in terms of restoring this ecosystem. But the good thing is that now the number of forests being added to the region is higher than the number of forest losses, which is a good perspective for the future. We are focusing on sustainable fisheries and sustainable tourism from the economic chain perspective, in a way of creating incentives both for fisheries and tourism to prosper in a sustainable way. And we are working with innovation in finance. Next, please. And talking about this last point, we have developed a finance plan for the region, looking at a 20 years scale, and with different instruments that move from the enabling condition investments to return investments. So we want to make communities and the entrepreneurships to have profits from the investments on conservation, and of course the philanthropic funds, the investments from the government will keep important, but we will have a number of others coming to this environment in the future if things go in the right way. Next, please. So we have many kind of lines of action now in the region. I'm going to stress two of them here. The first one I have briefly mentioned before is Futuri, the Alliance for the Regenerative Tourism. It's a project that is integrating a number of stakeholders from the tourism sector. And we want to stimulate those who are doing a good job in terms of sustainability, who are helping to support conservation through their daily work. We have a guide of best practices developed. Now we have more than 8 different stakeholders participating in the alliance. And we want to reach 200 in the next 2 years. That would be about 1/3 of the tourism sector. It's a very important region for tourism as a tourist destination in Brazil. So it's really an important driver for conservation. And the other big project in place is a restoration flagship that is part of the Prices Planet Coalition, coordinated by and supported by MasterCard in this case. And we are developing another alliance here, and a group of stakeholders that are from the territory and others that probably will come from other places to join. The goal for the next 3 years is restoring 5,000 hectares directly through this initiative. We must prepare the restoration chain to get there. So again, there is a big look to the economic chain, because we need to prepare this to reach the 20,000 hectares we are expecting for the next 10 years, and more than that in the following. So there is a long journey to get there, but we have already started. The next, please. Just talking about the impact, and the slide is in Portuguese, sorry, but just to illustrate, we have a number of indicators for each of these initiatives. In this case are the indicators for tourism, both in numbers people involved and numbers of working groups involved, new entrepreneurships supported, and the funds invested both in these entrepreneurships and in the protected areas in the region. So this is just in the beginning. We really expect this to expand, but this is basically to illustrate the kind of monitoring we do for the impact of the initiative. Next, please. And finally, talking about the impact and learning, I would say that what's definitely more visible from the beginning to now is that this change in the scale, the increase of in the number of protected areas in the region, and in the degree of implementation of them, and at the same time in this look for the potential of influencing the economic chains for conservation. So the next one, please. And we are trying to publish this information in different ways. This is just an example, a book that we have recently published about called Abrolhos Land and Sea. And we have a number of papers, and if somebody wants additional information on that, we can share. So again, we are talking about big challenges. The need of having partnerships is critical. The need of putting hard and being persistent a long time is also critical, and we are thrilling this way. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity here again, and I'm open for questions here too.
Thank you very much, Guilherme. That was fantastic. And a big thank you to all of our panelists. That was a very information-rich, inspirational, and coherent and concise set of presentations. So that means we have ample time now for Q&A and discussion. And so I'll be moderating the discussion amongst our panelists. And please, for our participants, I encourage you, if you have any questions about the guide, about the experiences of Guilherme or Pati, or Louise or myself, or Sarah even, feel free to pose some questions in the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer them both in the Q&A, but also live in real time. So the first question I'll actually prompt towards Louise. And Louise, I know you've had a lot of experience in this, but there's been a few comments in the chat about more project-focused projects within a landscape. What I mean by project-focused projects is sector-focused projects that are focused on agroforestry or sustainable coffee initiatives, or one small facet relative to the larger landscape. Can you talk about how projects like these, like an agroforestry program or a cooperative or whatever it might be, might scale up to become a fully fledged landscape partnership or integrated landscape initiative, and how this guide can provide guidance for programs and projects like that to mature and graduate to being more integrated in nature? Sorry, Louise, you'll need to unmute.
That's a really great set of questions. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that over the years. In fact, I came to this idea of integrated landscape management while I was working in the field of agroforestry, and recognizing the critical importance of agroforestry, both for conservation and sustainable development and mosaic type landscapes. And the question that persisted year after year as I worked in this really exciting arena, which, by the way, I don't think is sector specific. One of the things I like so much about agroforestry, agricultural production systems and land uses, is that it does cross sectors and cross land use boundaries, and it forces interdisciplinary thinking, and it the way it's practiced generally, not always, is in a very integrative way that provides an excellent analog to integrated landscape management. But in my experience with agroforestry, I was always wondering, okay, you've got this great set of practices over here, and you've got a relatively inspired set of farmers trying to make a living at agroforestry and trying to scale it up. But the question of scaling became very confounding. It's difficult because it doesn't make a lot of difference if you have one farmer over here in the landscape and another farmer over there practicing the best agroforestry in the world. Until you can get an actual landscape scale, a set of agroforestry practices, you are not going to get all the presumed benefits. And we take you back to that slide we did on landscape flows. You won't be able to really get the benefits of dealing with, water flows and wildlife flows and nutrient flows and soil flows and so on if agroforestry is just practiced here and there. So in my experience, integrated landscape management is an excellent set of practices and a way of looking at land use for tackling the question of how to scale up agroforestry so it has landscape scale impacts. In fact, Sarah Shear and I wrote a paper on that a couple of years ago, published in Sustainability Science, that's exactly trying to answer that question. And if you're interested, we'd be happy to send you the link to that. It's based on 2 case studies we did in Ecuador to demonstrate how ILM can help scale up agroforestry. And some of the examples are coffee agroforestry systems. So I appreciate the question. It's dear to my heart.
Thanks, Louise. And coincidentally, we just got a comment from someone in the Q&A asking if there's any projects in Ecuador. So that sounds like a fantastic example. So yeah, there are many programs in Ecuador. One of the things that we're finding through 1000 Landscapes is the number of programs that are emerging globally. And to Louise's point, many of these programs and projects started out as more focused agroforestry programs or seascape programs or economic sustainable development type programs that then recognizing that if they wanted to solve their challenges in that specific area, there was a need to become more holistic and integrated in their processes. So there's a lot to explore and unpack there. And 1000 Landscapes is seeking to provide the tools and services to help those types of projects and programs become more integrated and holistic in nature. So Patty, I would like to pose a question to you that's come up a few times in the Q&A. You mentioned, Patty, the long-term nature of the program and the initiative in Sierra Gorda, and you mentioned several times the level of persistence that you needed to make sure that you were successful over time. And it's very clear that your persistence and drive and the whole initiative's persistence has been really important. You also mentioned that there are numerous partners that you work with, and I can only imagine the level of coordination and convening that is needed over the long term to actually make that effective. Can you, Patty, just talk a little bit more about how important it is for landscape partnerships and initiatives to be focused at the long-term scale, the generational scale? I think you mentioned you've been doing this for 35 years, and while you've done a lot of work, there's so much more to do. Can you mention how and talk more about how long-term generational time commitments are so important to landscape partnerships? Sorry, Patty, you'll need to unmute.
It's something that you have to grow, to cultivate inside the society. Yeah. Nowadays in Sierra Gorda, the 5 counties of the region, 4 of them women, and they were ecological girls. Yeah. 20 years ago, the presidents of the counties and the market people in the market, the taxi drivers, the teachers, the young people, everyone has had this ecological movement on their schools every week, every year, celebrating, sharing the territory, singing a lot. Every year we celebrate 60 festivals for Mother Earth, yeah, in different communities. And it is just the joy and recognition they have with the territory. We sing and put pride, sing and put work, sing and ground them on their surroundings. And we have done it for years. Yeah, very ludic. And we go around to the schools or with the mamas or with the fathers, and even the men would love to sing and to share in these festivals where we share the vision and the love for the territory. And I think that it's something that you have to grow for generations. Yeah, I have 35 years and there's everything for to do in front.
Thanks, Patty. And I think that answers several of the questions that have come up of what should be the approach in building partnerships to ensuring that level of long-term partnership and commitment. And it sounds like the process that you took in the Sierra Gorda was very inclusive, was very participatory, and very process-oriented, in that by having a process that was participatory and inclusive, you got more buy-in to the program and to the initiative, and had more commitment across not just a few of the main champions, but you empowered as many partnerships and organizations and communities as possible to be champions themselves. So thank you for that. Guillermo, I want to pose a question to you about the Alroja seascape and landscape. And it seems like there was very much a need to balance the traditional conservation and protected area agendas and objectives with the broader needs of the landscape around livelihood development, agriculture, business. And I think a major component of integrated landscape management is balancing competing objectives when it comes to bringing together different stakeholders in a partnership. And a foundational competency of integrated landscape management, of course, is conflict management, conflict resolution, more importantly than just the management of it, is actually achieving that resolution. Guillermo, I wonder if you could touch on any tensions that existed between stakeholders in how you work to mitigate those tensions, to manage those conflicts and come to a resolution when balancing the different agendas of stakeholders between conservation and livelihoods, between protected areas and businesses. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Very good question. It's well, there are definitely many examples, and it's definitely one of the main challenges we will always have dealing with the conflicts in a complex environment like this. So I can mention in a specific example that I think was very emblematic. Like 12 years ago, we had a strong conflict with the intention of implementing a shrimp farm project in one of the main estuaries of the region. The project was supposed to be the largest in the country. And they kind of make all the political agreements to make it a viable project, and they started like something that was so big that nothing would stop. So we had to do exactly the opposite, and we kind of used their force to make it a bigger discussion and bring it to the national decision. And we had to make a coalition start. Oops, I'm sorry, I came mute for a minute. Yeah, but we started to make a coalition with the communities, but it had to grow, and it had to involve also politicians, the government representatives, other NGOs. We make a coalition of NGOs. And we have together proposed as an opposite direction the creation of a protected area instead of that project. Long story short, big conflicts, many people threatened by local governments and so on, but it ended with the visit of the president of Brazil in the Abrolhos. The President Lula went there basically to create this protected area, because it became a so big, so important thing nationally that the president had to go there to solve. Otherwise, it would be a conflict up to nowadays. And it was a very good example on how a very local thing can become big if we have a good coalition and we can make and work together. And I think this is the kind of cases that can make real change in all the world if we use the right strategy for that.
Thanks, Guillermo. Very, very comprehensive, excellent example that touches on a few of the other comments around good governance. There's a question in the Q&A about the need for governance systems that manages these integrated multi-sectoral challenges and actions. And you mentioned how developing a coalition of organizations is part of that governance system. But building on this a little bit more, because I think it is a really important element that Luis touched on as kind of the centralized element of our process as outlined in the practical guide. In the center, there is the landscape partnership itself, and that's phrased as the landscape partnership. And in a lot of ways, it does operate as the governance of the entire initiative. But the challenge is recognizing here at 1000 Landscapes that all landscape partnerships are unique, operate within their own specific context, their own specific culture, geopolitical constraints and opportunities. And so it's hard to provide clear guidance on what sort of governance system any one landscape partnership should use. But not just at the national level, or the subnational level, but at the individual landscape level, we're recognizing many different forms of governance that are being used to manage landscape partnerships. I wonder, I'm going to flip this question to both Luis and Pati to talk about some of their experiences with different governance systems. But Luis, to start with you, can you talk about how governance is really key to seeing a well-managed landscape partnership take shape, and how you can set up that governance system so that it lasts in the long time, for the long term, and doesn't just disappear when a champion or a leadership leaves the initiative?
Excellent question, a challenging one. And I agree with your preface that each situation is unique and it needs to be, your governance system needs to be tailored to the local circumstances and the local politics. That said, yes, I think it's possible to sketch out some basic principles about developing a good governance system. And I would say that at the base of it, the core of it is making sure that you create space to develop a one-on-one relationships as well as focusing on the whole. It's extremely important in terms of the trust building to really know where your allies and your opponents are coming from. And sometimes you won't find that out in a group process for various reasons. People are reluctant to, say what they really feel until they're testing the waters in a group process. So lots of behind the scenes work. And I'm sure Guillermo is very familiar with this and the work you've just described. It's about, understanding where people are coming from, figuring out, the whole question of getting to yes, that was about when we started popularizing this idea of negotiation, and it wasn't just diplomats who had to negotiate, it was people trying to solve problems all over the world. And so 20 years ago or so, this Getting to Yes book was published, and it had some real key principles in it that we tend to utilize a lot. It's understanding where your opponents, or especially your potential opponents, are coming from, and figuring out before you get into a big group setting where you're going to be able to reach compromise and where your common interests are. So I would just say that's sort of a foundational piece. And then building on that, obviously we want to make these processes as transparent in the group environment as we can, because that's the whole purpose, is getting these larger partnerships to be able to meet and work together. And so we have a number of so-called tools that we use that will be peppered throughout our learning modules and that are described a little bit in the practitioner's guide and the tool guide, having to do with understanding your stakeholders' interests and strengths. And I think most of us who work in this space have some familiarity with these tools that help us understand interests and capacities and so on, and making sure that you constantly re-examine who your stakeholders are. These partnerships grow, they change all the time. It's not sufficient just to understand that, once and then say, okay, well, now we've got that down. It's a constant process of adjusting and making sure that people feel comfortable in the space and that they're being tasked with the contributions that they're best suited to make. It's always looking at, fit for purpose, and different partners have different, very legitimate roles to play. And so the function of the group charged with, I would say, with landscape governance is figuring out who can do the best job and giving them the incentives to do that, so people are working as coherently as they can together.
Thanks, Louise. And you mentioned a lot of important points there. Is how do we raise the importance of these foundational competencies? Because so much do we see investors, donors, funders into a landscape partnership are funding specific projects, they're funding the implementation of the projects and looking to see the outcomes of those projects rather than funding for the key things that keeps the landscape partnership together and moving forward. And those are the things like coordination and facilitation and adaptive collaborative management that, based on our own structures, we haven't really put a lot of outcomes and outputs behind, and from a business as usual sort of way. So Patty, to turn this question into you, because it sounds like in the Sierra Gorda, you've done a fantastic job of championing the institutionalization and mainstreaming of these foundational competencies so that you have really strong coordination across partners, so that the partnership is being facilitated in a way that allows for adaptation, and that the financing is flowing towards what might be considered the indirect costs of an initiative, but really to drive the activities and actions of the partnership overall. So Patty, can you talk about how you've gone about in your 35 years coordinating the different stakeholders in the Sierra Gorda partnership and focusing on those foundational competencies like coordination and facilitation? That would be very helpful. And you'll need to unmute, sorry.
It is a very changing situation. Once the biosphere reserves in Mexico had incredible value for federal government, not now. Once we have climate federal policies, not now. Yeah, and the enforcement of authority is not anymore operating. They don't have resources. Then how do you have this territory with governance? It had helped us a lot, the decree as a biosphere reserve, and to have a management program done with very participatory. I think that it is the best way to grow governance. Yeah, if I have to do 100 workshops to get the approval of the communities for this, the management program, or at the time for the biosphere reserve decree, that's the way I love to do it. Because when we get it, it belongs to us. It belongs to everybody. Yeah, the day we had the decree and the Mr. President came to Jalpan to give us the declaration, it was like a festival for the Serrano population, because we share so much asking them for permission to get this decree that the day we got it, it belonged to every citizen. Then I think that what will help you a lot to go through all these changing political situations It's the governability that you have grown within the territory doing environmental education all the time to different stakeholders. Yeah, you have to do it from the governor all the way down. My life is like a propedeutico all the time. All the time we are giving different stakeholders this awareness and the transfer of these tools. And I think that it's the best way to do it, to grow it bottom up.
Thank you, Patty. Yeah, that's a really good point about balancing the bottom up to actually compete with top down interests is the kind of the takeaway point that I'm hearing, if that's accurate. But I think there's a need to mitigate policies coming from the top down by having a really strong coalition of local stakeholders that can better also manage and influence policies coming from the top down. And so when things get a little bit out of control or don't necessarily match local level interest, the local coalition can come together and work for themselves to do that quite a bit better. We only have a few minutes left here of this presentation, so we'll continue to answer some questions. I thank Sarah for answering a lot of these questions in the chat, and I hope everyone's paying attention to that. There's a few logistical questions that I also want to take care of. The guide right now, the practical guide and the tool guide, are available in English only. We are currently working to translate them into both Spanish and French and expect to have those available before the end of the year. And also, we apologize for the lack of chat functionality to share links to different resources here, but we will be following up with everyone that registered via email with both links to the guide as well as follow up. You can keep an eye out for also this recording, as well as blogs and other outreach materials on this webinar. So if you do have any questions, you can reach out to me, and I'm going to share a little bit of information here. For anyone that wants to follow up, we encourage you can reach out to me, tdur@ecoagriculture.org. Please do sign up for our newsletter. You can visit our website, www.landscapes.global, which is a rapidly growing and expanding website that will have more and more information. We also encourage you to visit Terrasso, our partner platform that unfortunately the information for Terrasso isn't here, but that's a great resource. I encourage you to visit that. Will be coming more online towards the end of this year and especially into early next year with resources, including, like I mentioned previously during the presentation, access to the practical guide in a more interactive and digital form. And if you are a landscape partnership, an organization that's practicing integrated landscape management, or just have an interest in learning how to collaborate with the fantastic collection of organizations that operate under the umbrella of 1000L, we really encourage you to reach out. The partnership is rapidly growing and we'll be transitioning into a scaling phase next year. And so we're looking for as many possible partners to help drive integrated landscape management forward. And also just to preface some other things, the practical guide is the first sort of flagship product of the 1000 Landscapes initiative. We are piloting a whole collection and suite of tools and services around the process that is presented in the practical guide. So as Louise alluded to, there'll be different learning modules for foundational competencies like facilitation, diversity and inclusion, landscape environmental flows, as well as core modules, learning modules on the 5 elements and the 18 corresponding outputs for each of those elements. So keep an eye out for those. We'll be rolling these out progressively over the next couple of years. It's obviously a very monumental and big task to develop such a comprehensive set of learning modules, but that's something you can keep an eye out for. And if it's something that you think you can offer some expertise on, please do reach out to myself and I can connect you to Louise Buck and the team working on those. Also, we're developing a suite of finance tools and mechanisms to kind of shift the flow of finance away from project by project, sector by sector projects to more integrated landscape projects. And we're developing financial mechanisms, assessment tools that can help with all of these different needs. And we're also, like I've mentioned many times already, developing a suite of software tools around mapping, data collection, storytelling, available on our platform called Terrasso. If you're curious about how to get more involved with that, I can connect you to our colleagues at our partner organization, Tech Matters, who is leading on the platform development. And we're also working with local communities to catalyze policy and advocacy and outreach around mainstreaming and institutionalizing integrated landscape management. And lastly, I want to mention that a big piece of integrated landscape management as we scale it up and start to mainstream it is communications around this topic. So we're developing a series of knowledge products and storytelling to tell the story of local landscape partnerships, just as Pati and Guilherme have just done with their landscapes in the Sierra Gorda and the Abrolhos. And so if you're a landscape partnership that's curious and interested in telling your story more externally to the outside world, we're more than happy to help you with that when the time is right. And we also hope to be providing tools and services to empower landscape partnerships to tell their own stories, to attract different partners, funders, donors, investors, whoever it might be, to really drive your landscape partnership forward and raise it up. So there's a whole suite of different things that we're trying to do. This is a big collaborative effort. We need all the help that we can get. And we are in this for the long term. So if you're interested in participating in the initiative, feel free to reach out to me. I'll connect you to the right folks. And we're at about time right now. So I thank you for all the participants that joined us today. Thanks to Louise for giving us a great overview of the guide. Thanks to Pati and Guilherme for presenting on how the guide is applicable on their own landscapes and sharing their experiences. And we will be following up with you all shortly. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you again. Have a fantastic rest of your morning, evening, or afternoon. And we'll see you all again soon. Thanks all.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks to the great panelists.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
So long, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again.